Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown joins Susanna and Martin Lewis now for a cost of living crisis special. On your Wednesdays, Good Morning Britain.
The worst maternity scandal in the history of the NHS. Hundreds of babies died or were left with brain damage because mistakes were made by the Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust. Parents have spent decades fighting for justice.
Why didn't he survive? Because of their negligence? Because they left him too late? It was like, Cameljit lost the baby. Cameljit lost the baby. So it's my fault. That's where I always thought it was my fault.
Treat with caution. Britain and the United States warn Russia will be judged by its actions, not words, after Putin promises to drastically reduce combat operations against two key Ukrainian cities.
Well, already this morning, Vladimir Putin's words appeared to be ringing hollow after a night of heavy bombardment on the outskirts of Kyiv and missile strikes right here in western Ukraine. The authorities here believe this is not a troop withdrawal, just a movement of specific units designed to mislead the Ukrainian military.
Off to another party, are we? Shame on you.
Feeling the heat over Partygate, Conservative MPs have been jeered by bereaved families of COVID victims as they attended a dinner with Boris Johnson. The Prime Minister faces further questions over the affair today. And from 7 o'clock this morning, how will the increase in the energy price cap on Friday impact you as the cost of living continues to soar? We bring you a special programme this morning with Martin Lewis, Britain's most trusted man. He'll be answering your questions in a live phone-in. It's a first here on Good Morning Britain. If you have a question, please give us a call for free on 08000 320 223 by 8:30 this morning. You must be 18 or over. And we'll be live across the country throughout the morning, finding out what you at home can do to ease the squeeze and reduce the impact on your energy bills.
And today's weather, cloudy and mild with outbreaks of rain in the south, turning colder in the north, and it's the cold that wins out as we head into the weekend. I'll have all the details of that and more coming up here on Good Morning Britain.
Wednesday, 30th of March, 2022. Live from Television Centre in London. This is Good Morning Britain. Susanna Reid.
Good morning, Britain. It has just gone 6 o'clock. Welcome to the programme. We are bringing you a very special show today because, of course, millions of us around the country preparing for bills to rocket when the energy price cap rises. 54% on Friday, and that is an extra £700 a year on average. From 7 o'clock, I will be joined by Martin Lewis, the man nicknamed the People's Shadow Chancellor. He's going to be here to help you navigate the pitfalls ahead and give tips on how to cope with soaring household bills and tax rises. Love that photograph. For the first time ever on this programme, we're taking your phone calls, answering your questions directly about the changes. So if you have a question, please give us a call for free on 08000 320 223 by 8:30 this morning. You can also contact us via Twitter and Facebook. We will do our best to get through as many queries as we possibly can. Just a reminder, you do need to be 18 or over. So, Martin, the People's Shadow Chancellor, will join me at 7 o'clock. First, though, our main news this morning, a landmark inquiry into the worst maternity scandal in NHS history will be published today. It is expected to conclude that hundreds of babies died or sustained life-changing injuries because of failures in maternity care at Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust. The review examined more than 1,800 cases over 2 decades. Lorna Shattuck is at the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital. Lorna, the number of children whose lives lost is truly shocking. What went wrong?
Well, Susanna, that is exactly the question that two mums whose babies tragically died here were asking when they wrote to the Health Secretary back in 2016, looking for answers. And that is what eventually, because they pushed and pushed, led to this inquiry by senior independent midwife Donna Ockenden. It's taken 5 years, and she'll be publishing her full findings later on at about 10 o'clock this morning. But she did publish some interim conclusions in 2020, which found, among other things, that the trust here was unwilling to learn from its mistakes, that it wrongly blamed families for their children's deaths, and that there was a culture of trying to keep the number of caesarean sections down. Now, the trust is waiting for the report to be published before it comments fully, but it has previously said that it takes full responsibility for those failures in maternity care, and it has offered its sincere apologies to the families affected. And of course, as you say, there are so many families affected. Those two ladies back in 2016 referred 23 cases to the inquiry. Donna Ockenden ended up looking into over 1,800. And it is those families who will be waiting and hoping for some answers finally today.
These are all he's, and I'll always keep them till the day I die.
Kamaljeet doesn't have any photos of her baby boy. She can only show me the clothes she excitedly bought him when she was expecting.
Yeah, it was the first one I bought, and that's the one he was going to actually come back home.
Little Manpreet died within hours of his breech birth in Shrewsbury in April 2003. Kamaljeet says she was denied a caesarean in time to save him.
Why didn't he survive? Because of their negligence? Because they left him too late? That's what I always thought, it was my fault. At one time, I was at the stage where I didn't want to live.
Kamaljeet and her husband didn't know it then, but they were among hundreds of families in Shropshire whose babies died or were left disabled or brain damaged, mostly between 2000 and 2019. After 2 delays, senior midwife Donna Ockenden will finally publish the findings of her 5-year inquiry into what happened later on. It's reported she'll say over 200 babies' deaths could have been prevented.
I don't know if the true scale will ever be discovered, but this report looked at around 1,800 cases. That's a huge amount of people impacted here, certainly the largest scale maternity investigation that we've ever seen.
The Trust isn't commenting till the full report's published, but it's previously said it takes full responsibility for the failures in maternity care here and offered its sincere apologies. Kamaljeet hopes today will end nearly 2 decades of heartache, and that in future the voices of mothers and families will be listened to and fewer little lives cut short. Lorna Shaddick, Good Morning Britain.
Talking to Dr. Hillary about that shortly. Also going to be joined by Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire, of course, plus the royal commentator Hugo Vickers on why he believes the Queen was absolutely right to have Prince Andrew by her side at the Duke of Edinburgh's memorial service. Hugo was there yesterday, can tell us about that. First, though, just coming up to 8 minutes past 6, here's Charlotte with the rest of the day's news.
Thanks very much, Susanna. Good morning, and the latest on Ukraine to start. Multiple explosions have been reported overnight on the outskirts of the capital, Kyiv, despite Russia's pledge to scale back military operations there and in the northern city of Chernihiv. The apparent concession by the Kremlin came after peace talks in Istanbul. Well, our chief correspondent, Richard Gaisford, is live in Western Ukraine for us. Good morning to you, Richard. I mean, it might sound like a positive step forward, but Britain and the US say that Russia should be judged on actions and not words.
And it's not just Western governments, Charlotte, that are sceptical about the words coming out of the Kremlin. The authorities here say that these troop movements are merely a rotation to mislead the Ukrainian armed forces. They believe either these troops are going to be replaced or will then be sent down to areas in the east to strengthen the Russian attack there. Certainly overnight in Kyiv, as you've mentioned, serious bombardment on the outskirts of the capital, but also missile strikes right here in Western Ukraine on the outskirts of this city of Militsky. A fuel dump, we understand, has been hit not far from where we are, and also a railway station 30 miles to our north. You'll read analysis in the papers today suggesting those peace talks might lead to a sit-down chat between President Putin and President Zelensky. That would appear to be difficult at the moment whilst Russia continues this bombardment and with Vladimir Putin's finger very much on the trigger.
This village near Kyiv is one of several retaken by Ukrainian soldiers. As they inspect the wreckage of lives and homes abandoned, they rescue a dog left behind as its owners fled. At peace talks, Russia promised to drastically reduce its operations around the capital and the northern city of Chernihiv. But as a missile hit the southern city of Mykolaiv, Ukraine's president warned positive signals from the Kremlin couldn't silence the Russian shells. It's a view echoed by the United States.
We believe that this is a repositioning, not a real withdrawal.
Alexandria and her son ran from falling bombs on the outskirts of Kyiv, finding help, food and friendship here in Melnitsky.
I feel truly safe here. People here have given me shelter. People have been helping however they can. They give us food, they give us clothes and everything. And most importantly, they give us love.
The meals are freshly prepared and served for free in what is normally a top-end restaurant. And at a local kindergarten, children from some of the most dangerous places on the planet play together with their mums who've brought them to safety as their dads stay and fight.
I don't even ask kids where they are from. I just ask their name and we make them feel comfortable here. We make them feel normal here.
For so many in Ukraine, though, normality feels impossible. Richard Gaisford, Good Morning Britain, Western Ukraine.
Boris Johnson will be grilled by MPs twice today, less than 24 hours after Scotland Yard revealed 20 fines were being issued as part of its inquiry into Downing Street parties which broke lockdown rules. Bereaved families of COVID victims heckled and jeered senior Conservatives last night as they arrived for dinner with the Prime Minister at a luxury hotel. Paul Brand was there.
Is this party going to help you forget all the others that happened in Downing Street?
Well, we're going to have a lot of fun, I know that.
Is dinner and drinks going to buy your loyalty tonight?
No, but the international security situation will.
You ready to forgive and forget the parties in number 10?
Well, I don't think it's got to do with the dinner.
Off to another party, are we? Shame on you.
Well, Jonathan Swain is at Westminster with more on this. Good morning, Jonathan. We can see from that then that the anger about Partygate is still very raw, and Boris Johnson set to face questions twice today.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a few heckles here during Prime Minister's question times at lunchtime. Now, in the last 2 weeks, the spotlight has shifted very much from the Prime Minister as the international leader trying to sort out the war in Ukraine. Now it's very much under the spotlight. He is a Prime Minister under pressure back home because of Partygate. Now, some within the Tory party have eased off recently. He's brought a bit of goodwill because of his handling of the war in Ukraine. But the Met Police have found that rules have been broken and 20 people have been issued with fines, though there is some controversy that the names of those 20 people have not yet been revealed. Well, the opposition party today will certainly push the Prime Minister and want to know if he has been issued with a fine. No suggestion that he has been or is about to be, but if he is issued with a fine, how will he respond? There's even some suggestion that the Prime Minister has hired a personal lawyer to deal with his response. Now, well aware, Charlotte, that people watching this may well be sick to the back teeth of hearing about Partygate. Others, though, are still incredibly angry about it. The Prime Minister is certainly not out of the woods yet.
No, more to come, no doubt. Jonathan, thanks very much for bringing us up to date with that. The Justice Secretary is proposing the biggest shake-up of the parole system in more than half a century. Dominic Raab wants to retake powers from the Parole Board to allow ministers to block the release of certain murderers, rapists and terrorists, as well as offenders involved in the death of a child. Mr Raab says he wants to keep dangerous criminals in prison for as long as is necessary and restore public confidence in the system. A charity in Fife, backed by the former Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown, has launched one of Scotland's biggest anti-poverty projects. An agreement signed with 6 companies will see millions of pounds worth of unsold household goods, bedding and furniture distributed to families struggling with the cost of living crisis. Here's Juliet Dunlop.
Filling bags with the basics, but it's not only toiletries in demand. This warehouse in Fife is helping families fill homes. Bedding, curtains, carpets, kettles, items now out of reach for many. All of it has been donated by Amazon, and Gordon Brown, a long-term supporter of this local charity, is the driving force.
Well, I think there is hardship and the government's not hearing. I think there's suffering and they're not seeing. I think there's pain and they're passing by on the other side. And remember, 3/4 of the people we're helping are working. They're on low pay. They just cannot make ends meet.
This project has already helped around 8,000 families. By the end of next year, they expect that number to double as more and more people come here for help, just with the basics.
We had to start thinking about, well, how can we make this crisis stop and be realistic about people's needs. Their mental health's not going to get better if they're living in a property where they don't have carpets, they're worried that their cooker's now not working, they've not got they've not got money to replace these items.
So great is the demand, other companies are stepping in, offering not only goods but skills like painting and decorating.
If you give them that bit of training, that bit of encouragement, they'll have the confidence to then take it into their own homes and create a better environment for them and really for their children.
It's hoped this model could be rolled out across the UK, but filling the gap and on this scale is becoming more and more difficult. Juliet Dunlop, Good Morning Britain.
More than 60,000 people will pack the Melbourne Cricket Ground today to pay tribute to the legendary Australian bowler Shane Warne at his state memorial service. He died after suffering a heart attack on holiday in Thailand, aged just 52. Well, Nathan Curry is in Melbourne with more on this for us this morning. Good morning to you, Nathan. I mean, there's still such a shock at the news of his early death, and some of the biggest names in sport and entertainment will be there today to pay their respects, won't they?
They will be, Charlotte. I don't think Melbourne's ever seen anything like this before. Typical Warnie to be able to draw this sort of crowd together. Names like Hugh Jackman, Ed Sheeran, Kylie and Danny Minogue, Sir Elton John. They'll all be performing up on the big screen. Chris Martin from Coldplay's even penned a song just for Warnie tonight, so it's going to be pretty special. Performing here, actually, a really nice touch, the granddaughter of Sir Don Bradman. She'll be singing our national anthem, so that's a really nice link between the Don and Warnie. That's going to be a really big moment. I suppose probably one of the biggest moments of the night will be when the Great Southern Stand is renamed the Shane Warne Stand. That's going to be a massive moment. It's something that his family has been very much looking forward to. They had the private funeral a few weeks ago now. That was a very sombre affair, but in very much Warnie's style. They want this to be a big celebration of his life. Already people have started coming here this afternoon. We're a few hours away now. They've been asked to put on their cricket whites if they can, so it's going to be a very special night here, Charlotte.
Nathan, thanks very much for that. That's Nathan Curry there with the latest from Melbourne. Now, a fundraising concert for Ukraine, broadcast live on ITV, has raised more than £12 million so far for the humanitarian appeal launched by the Disasters Emergency Committee. Ed Sheeran, Camila Cabello and Ukraine's Eurovision winner Jamala were among the stars taking part. And the singer Paloma Faith said the invasion had made her cherish her own children.
I feel so lucky to be able to put them to bed in their home, and that's not a luxury that those people in the Ukraine can afford at the moment.
Yeah, puts it all in perspective, doesn't it? And it was a brilliant concert. It was so poignant. There was the one moment when the violinist started playing in the bunker, the other violinists picked up, Nicola Benedetti was playing, and they read out the words of refugees, and it just, you know, brought a tear to your eye. But well done to all involved. And it's still on the ITV Hub if you want to catch up with it.
Really moving, and obviously raised huge amounts of money so far.
Fantastic.
Terrific stuff. Charlotte, thank you very much indeed. Let's have a look at the weather now with Laura, who is in central London at the headquarters of the oldest regiment in the British Army. Morning, Laura.
Good morning. Yes, a beautiful location. The Honourable Artillery Company behind me was the location of the very first ever balloon flight from the UK, and the real estate land behind me with a huge area of grass. It's actually the most expensive per square foot in the entire world. But of course, it is not for sale. Weather-wise, all changed, turning colder. Here's the details.
Temperatures may rise briefly, but then unexpectedly cool slightly. Box Boilers, proud sponsors of Good Morning Britain National Weather.
Yes, today is the day of change. We still have mild air holding on to the south of the UK, but progressively today, tomorrow more, especially by the end of the week, the floodgates open for colder air to sink down from the north. Temperatures set to tumble with the return of frost, ice and even some snow. That's even happening today. So here's how it looks for today, a three-way split. Southern areas, cloudy, mild, outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Central areas, this weather front slips south. This is the cold front on its back edge. We have rain, sleet and some snowfall over the North York Moors, northern areas of Wales. To the north of that, Scotland, cold and frosty to start. There'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning, but blustery, wintry showers move in across the far northeast, and they could be wintry with hail, sleet and snow. So temperature-wise, by this afternoon, 4 or 5 in the north, maybe 6 or 7 centrally, and still holding on to 15, maybe 16 degrees in the south, but adding in the wind, it will feel colder than that, particularly in the north. Overnight tonight, the whole band of cloud and rain slips southwards, and it's a frosty one ahead for many of us.
For the weather where you are in detail, go to itv.com/weather.
Laura, thank you. Still to come on Good Morning Britain, our cost of living special. Martin Lewis will join me at 7 o'clock this morning as millions of people brace themselves for the huge hike in energy bills this Friday. We're taking your calls and answering your questions. You can call us free on 08000 320 223. You must be over 18 to call. Lines are open until 8:30 this morning. We will try and get through as many calls as we can. And also this morning, questions over what appeared to be, of course, that show of support and endorsement by the Queen for Prince Andrew after he took a prominent role supporting her in yesterday's memorial for the Duke of Edinburgh. We'll speak to someone who was there in the Abbey. Discussing that next. First, let's get the news, travel and weather where you are. See you in a moment.
Good morning, I'm Warren with the headlines in London. Police say they're concerned for the welfare of an 11-year-old girl from Lewisham who's been missing since leaving school since yesterday afternoon. Caprice Maitai Barrett-Reid was last seen walking into Hilly Fields in Lewisham wearing her school uniform and a purple puffer jacket. Some homes in East London are still without power following a fire. 38,000 homes and part of the DLR were without electricity yesterday following a blaze at a substation in Poplar. UK Power Networks are working to restore services. The oldest surviving map of London will soon be going on display. The Civitas Londinium is a detailed sketch of the city created in the 1570s, giving us an insight into what life was like. And as you've been seeing, music artists from London came together last night to raise funds for Ukrainians. Last night's Concert for Ukraine, hosted by ITV, saw singers including Anne-Marie and Paloma Faith take to the stage. The money raised will help those who fled the conflict in Eastern Europe. Travel news now. South Western train services between Guildford and Wimbledon have been suspended due to power failure. Tickets are being accepted on other routes. Tube services are running well, but of course part of the Northern Line and the Overground remain suspended. Holly has the weather for you.
Dentec Eco Cross Flosser sponsors the local weather on Good Morning Britain.
Hello, good morning. A change on the way for today. We start mostly dry, some bright spells, but look to the north. This is a weather front. It brings outbreaks of rain for this afternoon, but then behind it, much colder air tucks in, which could see the potential of sleet and wet snow into tonight and Thursday. Have a good day.
We'll see you again in an hour, but now back to Susanna.
.23, counting down to our cost of living special, which begins at 7 o'clock when I'll be joined here in the studio by Martin Lewis. But first, let's have a look at the front pages this morning. Most of them feature photographs of a visibly moved Queen at the memorial service for the Duke of Edinburgh at Westminster Abbey yesterday. The Mirror's headline focuses on her pain, but also describes the Duke of York's prominence there as a stain on the event. Senior royals are reported to be dismayed at the decision to have Prince Andrew escort the Queen to her seat in Westminster Abbey. That is the front page of the Daily Mail this morning. The Eye claims the Prime Minister is in denial over Downing Street party fines and still insists no laws were broken, despite police handing out fines in at least 20 cases. Other front pages report on the Russian promise to withdraw troops from attacking the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. The Telegraph reports that President Putin has failed in his plan to capture the city. Well, I'm joined by the Mail's Andrew Pearce, the Mirror's Kevin Maguire, Royal Historian Hugo Vickers, who was at the memorial yesterday. But before we talk to all of you, let's cross straight to Kyiv, because journalist John Sweeney there in his orange beanie, keeping you safe, John. Now, last night, I think many of us went to bed thinking, right, there's hope. These peace talks have produced something. How does it feel this morning?
I felt exactly the same. There's a bar all the journalists use. We had a little bit of a celebration. There was a couple dancing. It's the first time I've seen people dance for the whole month. But on the way back from the bar, you heard the air raid siren. That means that somewhere, some part of the city, probably to the northwest where the Russians are closest, about 15 miles away, was on the end of incoming Russian artillery. And this morning I've heard artillery crumps, the town hall's behind me, and I've heard the air raid sirens go. So it feels a bit like the thing in Star Wars where the general who looks like a fish says, it's a trap, it's a trap. The Russians cannot be trusted. If they talk peace and then you hear the air raid sirens go and you hear artillery crumping, it means you cannot rely upon the word of Vladimir Putin.
Well, let's just remind viewers of that moment when you left the bar last night. Let's have a look.
So the Russian army is supposedly going away. Oh, sorry. Forgive me. Once again, I mean, Vladimir Putin, how can I put this? What phrase could I use?
What phrase would you use this morning, John?
I'm aware there are lots of kids watching the show, so I'm not going to finish. I'm not going to answer that question, Susanna. You're being naughty.
Well, I mean, it's just impossible to read the situation at any stage, isn't it? The amount of misinformation, propaganda, the fog of war, the messages which are given out, the allegations that people involved in peace talks at the beginning of the month might have been poisoned. Those people who were allegedly poisoned saying, no, we weren't poisoned. You know, that all the time you're being given signs, progress. You know, for instance, there are people saying the Russians have said that they will pull back on military activity outside Kyiv because actually they're not getting anywhere. And it's basically just a sort of embarrassing cover for the fact that they're failing with their mission in Kyiv.
I think you're right about that, Susanna. Essentially, I mean, here's some very simple facts to report. The electricity is still on, the internet is still on, and there are no Russian tanks in my street or anything like it. And the last time I went towards the war a few days ago, it was clear that the Russian army had pulled back. So the headlines are that the Russian army has failed to take Kyiv, and it's got nothing like it. That they have said they were going to pull out of the Kyiv Oblast, which means county, and the fact that I can hear artillery crumps means that isn't true. But I think the headline that they've lost the battle for Kyiv, that is true. And you can tell that because the electricity is still on and the internet is still on. How this ends up, I don't know. But what I do know is this: the resolve, the fight, the spirit of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people, that's incredibly strong. Also something else, gratitude here for the amount of the love from the West, and that would include the ITV concert last night, which, I mean, I haven't watched it, but just hearing the description of the violin playing, starting, and then everybody else starts, that word is getting through to Ukraine, and people here are genuinely grateful.
That's incredibly moving to hear that, John, that something that's put on television here actually has an impact on morale where you are.
Yes, I mean, my Ukrainian, I mean, Kyiv and Ukraine, it's very, very 21st century here. And that's part of the strange thing about this war is the Ukrainians are fighting for the future from within the 21st century. And the Russians are fighting a kind of 20th century war with tanks and armored columns. And kind of Vladimir Putin is back in the 19th century, locked in his strange world. So it does feel like a war between the future and the past. And my money is on the future.
John, it's good to see you this morning. Stay safe there in Kyiv. Well, here, let's turn our attention to what happened at Westminster Abbey yesterday. It was the memorial, of course, for the Duke of Edinburgh. And the front pages, as we've already reported, have many pictures of the Queen. But of course, she was supported by Prince Andrew as she went into the Abbey and was escorted to her seat. The royal historian Hugo Vickers was there in the Abbey. Hugo, what was that moment like when they came in?
Well, what you must think of, first of all, is the fact that the Queen made a supreme effort to be there. We know that she has mobility problems. We know that she's been unwell. We know that she didn't go to things like the Cenotaph and the Commonwealth Service, which are absolutely things that she would wish to be present at. And she was coming from Windsor, and so she came up in the car with Prince Andrew, and they came in through the South Transept. Now, if you're going to suggest that this is a moment to sort of reintroduce Prince Andrew, had he, as was in the programme, arrived at the west door and walked right up through the whole of the Abbey, then I would agree with you. But in fact, he came in very discreetly with the Queen. Now, the Queen needed an arm, and she had a stick. So what are you going to do? You're going to give her a nurse? You're going to give her an equerry or something like what? It's perfectly natural that she should be with her son. And actually, to be quite honest, I was in the Abbey. Most people in the Abbey would not have even seen Prince Andrew.
Andrew, the Daily Mail this morning, your paper, saying that other members of the royal family were a little bit appalled at this.
Yeah, I didn't. When I saw he was with her, look, we've written that he's the favourite son.
Yeah.
And as we said yesterday, this isn't just a royal family; it's her family. So she wanted to be supported by, but the trouble is, he is a man who's just paid out £12 million to settle an appalling sex abuse case against a minor. He's never admitted to anything, of course, but £12 million was handed over.
Well, he's denied.
He's denied
everything.
He's denied it. And the optic it presents to the whole world, the Queen being accompanied by... I hear what Hugo says, who was it to be, but they could have found somebody else. But it was her decision. I'm reluctant to criticise the Queen on the day, which was all about her magnificent husband who'd done a great job for country, but it doesn't look great.
Omid Scobie, who is a journalist who's very close to Prince Harry and Meghan, tweeted, well, I think this is interesting. He tweeted, his presence was always going to be controversial, but Prince Andrew taking on the self-appointed role of consort for the day has completely overshadowed a beautiful service. And to think just a week ago, palace sources were fretting about the optics of a wheelchair, Kevin. That's the tweet.
Yeah, I think there's something in that. I mean, look, you saw a very elderly woman who did make a supreme effort, as Hugo said, to get there. It is her husband she's lost. The service is about that. But it was a colossal mistake. Him, of all people. Why not Charles, Anne, Edward, William? Almost anybody except a man, a disgraced, shamed, shunned son who, in a very sordid case, is paid 12 million so he doesn't end up in court. It did feel like he was on parade and she was rehabilitating him publicly. I had people watching at home, Hugo, not in the Abbey, but people watching at home, saw that. And I know from the people I've spoken to, there's kind of shock.
Hugo, there's a private, personal dynamic, isn't there, where a mother might forgive her son and pretty much anything. But there's a public visual which is endorsing him.
Well, I don't think it was endorsing him. I mean, as I said, if he'd walked up the aisle, if he'd been greeted at the West Door like all the rest of the royal family... Do you think that makes a difference, though? No, not at all. I mean, they were both coming from Windsor together, and, you know, yes, she is his son, and, you know, he has also lost his father. Now, you gentlemen would accept that he's not actually a convicted criminal. But convicted criminals, if I'm not mistaken, are actually... They come out of prison, don't they, on these occasions?
And are rehabilitated? To
go to a service. So they come out for funerals. Even... Don't the Krays come out for these occasions? Yes. So, come on. I mean, he's not a convicted criminal, and all he was doing is accompanying his mother. It was incredibly discreet, to be quite honest. And even if you look at the optics, when she's in the car, she waves, he doesn't wave. He's not coming back. We know that. He's lost all his positions, and he has the right to be there at his father's funeral.
Well, I wonder whether she's saying, the Queen is saying, above all else, he's my son.
Well,
and this was his father.
I think there is an element.
She almost doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. And
well,
that's
I think there's certainly...
the message.
I mean, I think the whole... Everything the Queen does is to do with conciliating and moving things forward. And the fact that she's seen with him in public shows, I suppose, to the world that they still get on. I mean, she stripped him of all his titles. You know, the media might like to say, well, they no longer speak or something. He's so furious about it. They're quite clearly perfectly in tune with each other. I don't think that's a bad thing to see on a day when you're celebrating the life of a husband of 73 years. Do you?
Do you know, can I just say here, that my problem about this, it's the conflict between the role of mother and monarch. That's what it's all about.
It's the personal versus the public.
Instead of us all talking today about the magnificent Prince Philip, who was a magnificent, Kevin might not agree, but the magnificent support to the Queen, a great support to the country, we're talking about her shamed son. And I think that's and that is a pity.
Well, there's always going to be that tension between the private and the public, but she has a very public role. And she was parading... look, it wasn't parking offences he paid to settle. This was a horrible, horrible case. I mean...
Of which he hasn't actually been convicted, to be quite honest.
No, but he's paid 12 million.
Yes, but you know perfectly well that they always settle those cases in America.
I know perfectly well. I know perfectly well on this case. You're quite right, I know perfectly well. That's why I think she made a big mistake.
Well, what would you have... I mean, do you have no compassion for the Queen on this occasion? When you think of
Absolutely.
She's nearly 96.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, you know, she needs somebody with her. I can't see it personally.
This was poor... look, this was poor judgment. There's no question. And in one way, you feel... And when I was watching it, I was thinking, because it's a memorial service for her husband, does Buckingham Palace think you just have to suck it up and you can't critique it at all and mention it?
This isn't just people sort of watching television, because according to Andrew's paper, The Mail, senior royals reluctantly accepted that Andrew would accompany her, but they had hoped common sense would prevail and that he wouldn't play such a prominent role. That's other members of the royal family.
I'd be interested to know how they know that, but there are 13 kings and queens and a great number of foreign royalty and people like who'd come a long way to come to this service, and they were all being entertained in London by the Prince of Wales and people. So the royal family were actually pretty busy looking after all of them. I mean, they'd all made the effort to come, unlike Prince Harry, for example, but, you know, they had. And so they were busy. And, come on, it's just common sense. Prince Andrew's at Windsor and he comes up with the Queen and he goes back with the Queen.
Well, it was a car share.
He does.
I don't know what it was.
But just to say here, since... because we know she's declined physically, he's there most days and he's been looking after Mum because he lives nearby. Edward's nearby too, but he's got lots of engagements. However, as a passionate monarchist, unlike this bloke who's a Republican who's loving all of this, I just feel perhaps there was... Even if he just got her out the car and got her to the door, and the Dean could have shown her to her seat.
No, that would have looked very much more frail. I mean, holding the arm of the son is... I mean, any mother at any funeral will do that. No, come on. I think a little bit of human compassion on this one.
No, she would have wrestled with it. She made her decision.
The son she chose.
Yeah,
that's very publicly.
I think very obviously it was the Queen as a mother.
Won the decision. She decided monarch, mum won.
Yeah, it's a very personal one, wasn't it? All right, thank you very much indeed for now staying with us. Hugo Vickers, thank you for being with us this morning. And for offering your insights. In a moment, we're going to speak to Dr. Saleha Hassan, whose father died from COVID at the same time as the Downing Street Christmas parties back in 2020. We will get her opinion on Boris Johnson's decision last night to host a dinner party for Tory MPs on the day the first Partygate fines were issued. You're watching Good Morning Britain on ITV. So the cost of living special with Martin Lewis begins at 7 o'clock. But in the meantime, I'm still joined by the Daily Mail's Andrew Piss, Mirror's Kevin Maguire and Dr. Hilary is here at the desk as well. We're also joined this morning by Dr. Saleh Hassan, whose father died from COVID at the same time as the Downing Street Christmas parties back in 2020. And Dr. Hassan, I expect you bristled yesterday when you saw that on the day that the police issued 20 fines for breaching the rules on COVID, Boris Johnson decided to hold another party for Conservative MPs, including, amongst the guests, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who had dismissed the Partygate affair as fluff.
Is this party going to help you forget all the other parties in number 10?
Absolutely.
What was that like for you yesterday, Dr. Hassan?
Do you know, I think for me it's not a surprise. It's come to the point where this kind of behaviour, this lack of integrity, of leadership and of compassion is the hallmark of this government, of the way that they've behaved. I think I feel that there was some symbolism in that, in the fact that it was a blatant in your face to the rest of us, not just those of us who've lost loved ones, but also the rest of the country that stuck by the rules. And people who are still battling COVID today, because that's on the up, they actually don't care. Yesterday was also the anniversary of the first heart going up on the COVID memorial wall, and bereaved families have been gathered there from all around the country. Wouldn't it have been better to draw a line under Partygate, as it's claimed that party was all about, instead going to the memorial wall, showing some humility, saying sorry even, is a good place to start. But they didn't. They went and tried to draw a line over it by probably downing a few and having a good hangover.
They were heckled, of course, by people who have lost loved ones at that party yesterday. Kevin, your paper first broke the news of the fact that there had been parties at Downing Street when everybody else, including Dr. Hassan, was under the strictest of regulations. Has Boris Johnson accepted yet that the rules were broken?
No, Downing Street yesterday was maintaining its line, and the Prime Minister's clearly lied to Parliament and misled Parliament all the way through. He said there were no parties, all regulations were followed. The official sanction, 20 fixed penalty notices, possibly more to come because other evidence is still being investigated, is the official declaration the law was broken, parties were held, and the Prime Minister just doesn't face up to it. Now, the 12 parties were under investigation by the police, and he's believed to have been at 6 of them. Now, he's had to answer, along with 100 others, a questionnaire, which you effectively answer under oath. He's employed a very expensive lawyer to fight his corner. He hasn't been fined yet. He may or he may not, same case with the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. But the point is, he created the culture in Downing Street, and that was a partying culture of ignoring and flouting the law that he imposed on others. And let's not forget, we've just seen the Queen with her shamed son Andrew at the Abbey. 2 parties were held in Downing Street on the eve of his funeral. Now, Boris Johnson wasn't at those, but again, it was the culture he created.
Yeah. Andrew, what will the consequences of these fines be, considering that the message seems to be coming out from ministers at the moment? Have you not realised there's a war on? More important stuff. Jacob Rees-Mogg dismissed this inquiry as fluff. Has the pressure been taken off the Prime Minister? He seems to think so, if he's going to hold a party on the day of the fines for party.
Well, that party would have been in the diary, to be fair, for months, and we didn't know when the reports were going to come out about how many people were fined. And
but don't you think, I mean, again, don't you think, isn't there a sort of taste, decency and sensitivity issue here?
They could have cancelled it.
Dr Ehsan says, you know, when Dr Ehsan has lost her father at the same time as these parties were going on, when she finally sees some sort of justice, fines being issued, the Prime Minister's response is, let's have a party.
Yeah, well, funding political parties goes on all throughout the year. Look, he hasn't been fined yet. We don't know if he's going to be fined. Do we even know whether he's been questioned by the police, the Prime Minister?
We know he had a questionnaire because...
But we don't know if he was questioned face-to-face. This is ongoing. He's going to escape the worst of this because of what's happening in Ukraine, even if, in my view, he gets a fixed penalty notice himself. 3 months ago, I think he would have been in dire terminal trouble. But I've talked to Tory MPs who put in letters of complaint saying they wanted a motion of no confidence. They wanted to get him out. Yeah. They've changed their view.
Yeah, some
because
people
of
have withdrawn them. Yeah. Dr Ehsan, what would you like the consequences to be once all the fines are issued?
I think, first of all, knowing who the fines have been issued to, because we're not being told that. I think it's a matter of huge public interest that we know. And if one of the fines does go to the Prime Minister, it suggests that he's broken the laws that he set, rules that he set, that the rest of the country were doing their best to abide by. And I don't also buy the fact that, it's fluff. If it's fluff, are the rest of the people who are around the country who incurred penalties for alleged breaches that they were found to have conducted, are they going to be refunded the money that they paid? What I'd like to see is proper justice to be done, and for me that means the Prime Minister being made accountable. And if you hold that level of office, you are going to have to be seen to be going by the rules, especially if they're rules that you've made. And for me, I would feel that his position is untenable.
Well, it's interesting, Kevin, two things that Dr Ehsan says there. Firstly, Jacob Rees-Mogg said that this wasn't of the fundamental seriousness of, for instance, the war in Ukraine. So, as she says, could people who've been fined for something that wasn't fundamentally serious and for something that is now being dismissed as fluff, can they just go back and say, well, actually, could you refund our fines, please, because it wasn't fundamentally serious?
Yeah, more than 120,000 people. Fines between £200,000 and £10,000. Is it fluff? I mean, look, that's just a terrible, aloof arrogance of somebody who's out of touch and feels he's privileged and entitled and part of an elite where the law, rules, regulations do not apply to them. It matters because it's fundamentally basic that you need political leaders who are making the laws to follow those laws, and you have to trust them to do that.
And you also, Andrew, you need to trust that they're telling the truth. And let's just have a look back at what the Prime Minister and ministers said about the allegations before the fines were issued.
All guidance was followed completely during number 10.
What I am aware of and absolutely certain of is that all rules, and especially around the pandemic, they would have been followed at all times. Of that, I would be absolutely certain.
I have been reassured that all guidance was carefully followed as it continually is.
If there's a breach of the rules, there's a breach of the rules. If anyone held a party contrary to the rules, of course that's the wrong thing to do. If something unsubstantiated from anonymous sources actually materialised, then of course it would be wrong.
What I can tell you is that all the guidelines were observed, continue to be observed.
20 fines means they weren't.
Exactly, and You have to feel sorry for people like Dominic Raab and the Health Secretary, because they were fed a line by Number 10. They go out and say, to the best of my knowledge, there were no parties. One person who did know there were parties was the Prime Minister, because he was at some of them.
And he said in the Commons, Kevin, that the guidance was followed.
Look,
He actually said there were no parties in the Commons.
Yeah,
So is he responsible for lying to the House of Commons?
Yeah, misleading the House of Commons. Now, you'll say he didn't know when he was having a glass of wine or blowing out the candles on his birthday cake that it was a party. That's what he will try and say, so I didn't do it deliberately. Unfortunately, Prime Ministers, other ministers, politicians get away with lying in Parliament. You're supposed to resign. It's supposed to be a resignation matter. But I don't think there's a gram of honour left in the body of Boris Johnson.
My understanding is what he will have told on the questionnaire is that there was a drink in the office. He didn't regard that as a party. Drink after work, drink with his colleagues, bit of birthday cake, not a party. That's my understanding.
Right, OK, let's move on from Partygate because we have other issues to discuss. And one of them is, we're going to talk to Dr Hillary about. Public satisfaction, Dr Hillary, with the NHS is at its lowest level for 25 years. Is that because of COVID, the waiting lists, the fact that other services didn't get the attention that they needed?
It's simply because people can't get appointments. They can't get appointments with their GPs, they can't get their operation carried out in hospital, and they're currently dissatisfied. They know that the NHS has been under huge pressure. They know that there are huge shortages of staff. However, what's important to them is getting their cancer treatment, their diagnosis, getting their hip done, getting their knee done, their cataract operation, getting an appointment with a GP, it's sometimes taking 3 weeks. However, GPs saw 26 million patients in January alone. They're still working very hard. There just aren't enough of them. And when the government say you've got to do an extra day a week for no extra pay, it's actually driving GPs away from the profession rather than helping to recruit more.
Dr Hassan, I mean, this must be very dispiriting for you to hear as well. This is, for the first time since 2002, more people were dissatisfied with the NHS compared with those who were satisfied.
Oh, look, I can't blame them. You know, if you're a patient and you're struggling to get seen, if you aren't able to get a resolution for your medical problem because of waiting lists, then, you know, utter sympathy there. But at the end of the day, I feel chronic underfunding, cuts, changes to working patterns following the junior doctor's contract, all of these things have led to a grinding down of all sorts of things. Services, morale, even retention is very challenging. I work in emergency medicine within A&E. Life there is really tough. There's got to be, you know, a seriousness about the future of the NHS if we want to be there to provide, a viable service. At the moment, it's on its knees. And what kind of quality of service can you give when you're struggling like that?
Dr Hassan, we really appreciate your company this morning. Thanks very much indeed. I mean, it cannot help NHS staff that on Friday, free parking for those who work in NHS hospitals in England will end.
That's right, and all the reasons, all the justification for giving free parking to the NHS staff during the pandemic, they're still there. They've still got high numbers of cases, they're still working unpaid overtime, they're still struggling to get to work. Let's facilitate them getting to work to do the job we want them to do, not take away the free parking. It's a slap in the face.
Dr Hillary, thank you very much indeed. Andrew, Kevin, thank you. Still to come in the wake of the first police fines being handed out to those involved in the Partygate scandal. We will speak to the Deputy Prime Minister, Justice Secretary Dominic Raab, about whether it's right that they're not being named and shamed. That's later. Now, though, it's competition time. You could win £80,000 in time for Easter. Andy Peters has the details.
Morning, here's your chance to win an amazing prize. An incredible £80,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. And the best news is we'll get it to you in time for Easter.
Just think what you would do with all of that tax-free cash in your bank account.
But don't take my word for it. Here's what some of our previous winners did when they found out they'd won big.
Well, I was screaming down the phone. I said, is this a hoax? It's made retirement a lot more pleasant for me.
I never thought I would ever win. Treat my family, my friends.
Go for it.
It does happen. Dreams come true.
£80,000 in your bank account in time for Easter. It really could be yours.
If you'd like to be in with a chance of winning this huge amount of money, here are the entry details.
For another chance to win £80,000 in time for Easter, text cash to 62525. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or go to the website. Entries cost £2. You can call 09068 782525. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and phone number to BK11 PO Box 7558 Derby DE1 0NQ. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 2 p.m. on Friday the 1st of April. You must be contactable on the 8th and the 11th of April. Good luck.
Expect warm showers followed by 15 chapters of steamy romance. Box Spoilers, proud sponsors of Good Morning Britain National Weather.
A very good morning to you. I'm at the Honourable Artillery Company this morning. Beautiful views obscured by cloud. It's a pretty cloudy, grey start to the day this morning, particularly for southern areas of the UK, and also exceptionally mild. But that is about to change. The mild air that's been dominating is being pushed away. Cold air flows down from the north, and that allows temperatures to tumble by day, by night, to below average. That's the first time we've seen that in quite a few weeks. A real shock to the system as we head through the next few days. And this is how things are looking for today. A three-way split. Southern areas, cloudy, mild with rain. Central areas, we've got this changing weather front that behind it brings snow. To the north of that, sunshine, but here it is a lot colder. As we head through the day, we stick with the cloudy, mild, murky conditions in southern areas, some low cloud and fog for southwestern areas of England and Wales. Centrally, this weather front brings with it outbreaks of rain, but behind it, cold air tucks in, so the chance of some snowfall through the North York Moors over the highest of ground and northern hills of Wales as well. Scotland and Northern Ireland, sunshine prevails, and here we see some blustery showers, wintry as well. Temperatures here may be 4 to 6 degrees, but when you add in the wind, it'll feel so much colder than that, but still holding on to the mild in the south. So let's take a look at our 7-day outlook. For Scotland, Northern Ireland and for northern areas of England, so for the northern half of the UK. Looking at our temperatures first of all, and the trend is for temperatures to be below average, both by day and by night, some hard frost developing. And let's look at our percentage chance of rainfall, how likely you are to get wet through the next few days. It is really hit and miss because it's sunny spells, wintry showers, chances of weather fronts bringing some rain, and that continues through the weekend into next week as well. Fortunes further south to England and Wales for the next 7 days. Again, temperature-wise, it may be mild today, but temperatures drop dramatically from tomorrow onwards, and it stays cold as we head through the weekend and into next week. And again, our percentage chance of rainfall, relatively high today with this band of rain, hit and miss with sunny spells and some scattered showers through the next few days. Into next week, though, it does look drier, but staying cold.
For the weather where you are in detail, go to itv.com/weather.